Still in chapter 6. Now in 6.3, we're looking at the test of the best explanation. And again, what Griffin wants to do is to talk about talk about objectivity in the context of values, right? That you can have some of it, right? It's not just a matter of values are just as the taste model suggests, simply knee-jerk reactions, and it's a little deeper than even that sort of Wittgensteinian, Donald Davidsonian model said that it's just a community that happens to use those values, and there's a commensurate notion of my understanding of that value, the communities, and then we can have agreements and disagreements based on that. Yeah, that's part of the story, but there's even something deeper than that that would go to beyond just simple communities, and something deeper that we talked about at the end, like a fulfillment of a life or an accomplishment in life, right? So these are deeper notions. Maybe not be perfectly objective, like 2 + 2 is 4. Maybe it doesn't reach that, or the God's eye view isn't attainable, but it wasn't attainable in science, so don't be mad if it's not attainable in ethics either. But Griffin does think that we have a kind of, I just labeled it with an S, so this sort of sensitivity to values, which is a combination of our taste and perception, right? He doesn't want to prioritize that. He thinks that, we have a kind of reaction and recognition. And again, we're in Neurath's boat, both in science and in ethics. So he's got 2 boats, Neurath's fleet, I guess you could say. This can all be developed. You can develop your taste. You can develop your perception. You get better at this stuff. Again, that used to be the old idea. Maybe it sounds a little snobby or privileged now, but that was the whole idea of education, was to, train you up to be more sensitive about things. So, you would read all these great works of literature to get more receptive to values and things about the human condition. Okay, but in any case, whether you buy all that, the point is that Griffin is saying that we can do this, right? We do get better at this. And also, one of the things to sort of bolster his notion of the objectivity, the level of objectivity appropriate to some values, not all. Remember, he doesn't say it's an either or, like they're all perfectly objective or none of them are. He's saying some are fairly objective and some clearly aren't. So again, we don't try not to read him as having a stronger thesis than he does. It's actually kind of weak. He's just saying some values are deep, they're fairly objective, not perfectly objective, but that doesn't, so they're far from being just knee-jerk trivializations. So he wants to now look at what science does and say, again, there's an analogy with ethics. So as we're in Neurath's boat for science, we are in Neurath's boat for ethics. There's a fact that you could have, and I've simplified Griffin's discussion. It goes something like this. You have groups G1 and G2. Now, it's a fact when you look at, and Griffin's going to even sort of downplay this a little bit later, but, G1 maybe accepts values 1 and 2, right? So, yeah, with that, but rejects values V3, and V4. Now, group G2 might have the opposite, right? Where they accept values V3 and V4 and reject this one. So you have all kinds of convergences and divergences. You have convergences within groups. You have divergences between groups. Why do we have that, right? How do we really explain this? Now, Griffin, tries to tell a story here. He doesn't think that either of these more simple models of value judgment are going to explain some of the facts we see. And, well, he's borrowing something from science. When something is real and given objectivity in science, it's usually, not always, it's usually because it plays a good role in explanations. And it plays, in science, we tend to say something exists, not all the time, because philosophy of science is a big, wide open field. But one notion in a particular understanding or a particular version of interpreting science in the discipline philosophy of science says something like this, that scientists tend to say that something exists, like an X exists, when X plays like a causal, a causal role in the best theories. So why, for instance, something pretty abstract, like in general relativity, you have this weird thing called a space-time manifold. What the heck is that thing? Well, if you look in general relativity, you go into all the nuts and bolts of it, you're going to find out that that weird thing called a space-time manifold plays a causal role. It does stuff, right? It's in a causal relationship with things like chunks of matter can influence it, like bend it, and then when it's bent, it can influence other chunks of matter. So like it relates, so they would say something that maybe isn't directly seen or directly observable. Nonetheless, we're pretty sure it's playing a causal role in stuff. So we're going to say it exists, right? So, it interacts with the stuff we can see. So it plays a causal role, and it turns out it plays a huge causal role. It's the main thing in the theory. So yeah, so then it's like, yeah, even maybe we can't see it directly or whatever, you can't taste it or spray paint it or something like that. It's playing a causal role in general relativity, which is like one of the best theories, right? Quantum mechanics, general relativity. So you've got something that plays a really heavy duty causal role, interaction, all that stuff in a top level theory. Well, that's when physicists are going to go, okay, I think that's a pretty high bar. And this space-time manifold met it, so we're going to say, you exist, right? So something like that. Or, something a little less exotic, like electrons, right? They play a good role. Why? Because they play a causal role in explaining all kinds of things, like why the lights are on. How they work, how little electric motors work, how neurons, stuff like that. So they play a role in a diverse number of situations, natural situations in our best theories. So yes, welcome to the Existence Club, space-time manifolds and electrons. So that idea, human interests can, now we shift to, again, we're still in Neurath's both. Don't lose sight of that. Don't flip back to that God's eye view. Always keep in mind that we're talking about our best theories in the context of theorizing within the world, right? Remember the big thing about, getting the God's eye view. Don't have that, right? So if it doesn't meet that standard, nothing meets that standard because we're not gods. We're just little tiny people running around trying to figure things out. So human interests can, in some cases, right, the fulfilled life, right, can become part of the world of facts, sort of this factual part, and they have a sense of objectivity and some value judgments, like an accomplishment or whatever. What Griffin is trying to get at is some value judgments can have truth values. Now, like they could be true or false. Like like when we make these judgments about accomplishment in life, like we could say something like, yeah, you're right, you didn't accomplish anything. Sad, but it is true that you did not have a sense of accomplishment in life. And that's not just willy-nilly, right? That's something quite like a fact in the world. So human interests, they can have these sort of matters of, again, as we saw in a previous video, they can sometimes just be matters of attitude adjustments. Sometimes they're biological, but sometimes they're these deep sorts of interests, like accomplishment in life, that they kind of are part and parcel of the human world. That's, as I mentioned in the last video, that's all intermeshed with the world of facts, right? Because we don't stand outside, we're in Neurath's boat. So in that sense, some of these values can play a very important role in our ethical theories. And the ones that play a big important role in some of our best or most powerful ethical theories, well, those value judgments and the values in them could become part of kind of the furniture in this sense, not of the independent world of us, but our sort of enmeshment with the natural. So this combination. Remember, Griffin has a sense of extended naturalism. Go back to a previous video to hear me talk about that. So in that sense, we can put our values and things to a kind of test in our theories, and we can get better at developing them and get to the point where, we can start to try and explain convergence and divergence amongst cultures. So this is a way of using a scientific model to test ethical ideas.